And take 3. This is the A to Z podcast. I'm Zach Jackson.
Yeah, boy.
That child on the other end is Andre Knott. If you're listening to this, it's because you're out celebrating that child who was born in a manger in Austin, Texas in 1995 named Baker Mayfield. The Browns are back, and so is the A to Z podcast. Every week we do this.
He really was born. Wait.
What?
He was really born in 95?
He was born in 1995. You're old as shit, my friend.
Yeah, man. I remember what I was doing in 95. And you know what? I hope I can be a child the rest of my life because Lord knows I feel 40 every morning when I wake up. Go ahead and tell everybody all the disclaimers and make sure you get everything professionally done and ready.
Well, I already swore, so that one's out the window. The A to Z podcast is presented, as always, by Cleveland Scene, by the Honeymoon Grill, and American Fireworks. The fine folks at AmericanFireworks.com sponsor our Glory Days segment. We may get to that in this episode. We are definitely going to get to that in the next episode. But we've got big football news and doings and scenarios with college football. The Browns, for the first time in years, have won back-to-back games. The Browns, it looks like, are finally going to escape the AFC North basement. The Bengals, who have always been one of the most embarrassing organizations in sports, but have been saved by the Browns, among others, are really on their way to taking that. And look, we're going to tell you to keep the brake pedal handy. We're going to tell you not to throw the parade quite yet. But we all know that quarterback is somewhere between half the battle and 80% of the gosh darn battle in the NFL. And Baker gives you reason to be excited. So as we joke, please be excited. If you are a Northeast Ohio football fan and you root for the Browns and you've suffered through this and you also root for the Buckeyes, you had a hell of a weekend, Trey, and people should be enjoying it. Hopefully they're hydrating up and recovering from the excitement that Saturday and Sunday brought.
Well, one of the better sports weekends that comes throughout the year, considering with Thanksgiving and then the night before Thanksgiving, you had LeBron back in Northeast Ohio. And no matter how you feel about that story, just leading up to what we've had over the past week, it's been an overdrive, to say the least, which is okay. And it's, for the most part, been a lot of positives, whether it be the Cavaliers, other than that game against LeBron, what they were able to do. The Ohio State game, I think, reminds you what it's like to be a fan. And then what the Browns did was fantastic. I said something to Terry Pluto during our Browns pregame show on TAM on Sunday that caught me off guard, but it caught him off guard, and it caught Mike Snyder off guard. But I think when it was said, we all agreed, I think the coolest thing that we have going, and this is before they played on Sunday, the coolest thing we have going is that, you've made the tags that's so appropriate and so apropos, December and Berea. For the first time in a long time, I look forward to Browns games on Sundays, and that's a huge stride. Zach's right. Enjoy this for where you've been and what you've been through, but also remember where you've been and where you've been through. And don't become like Chicago Cubs fans, is the way I would say it.
Let's
Cubs
leave
fans,
logic out of this, Trey.
No. Well, I always remember this because you mock it, you can, but if we don't do this in life, we become the fodder of jokes. The Cubs were always lovable. The Cubs were always, their fans were always, the ones you consoled. And other than here in Northeast Ohio, everybody hates Cubs fans now because of how they've acted because of one World Series. I think same with Red Sox fans. You can go through different fan bases. Just act like you've been there. This is going to be cool for a while. Just act like you've been there. But the Ohio State thing, to me, it gives me more question marks because the team I saw on Saturday in Columbus, I wanted to see that team a couple more times before the Turkey Day.
Where'd you go?
I'm here.
Okay.
I finished my state.
Sorry.
I'm just saying I wanted to see what we saw on Thanksgiving what we saw on Saturday is a little bit of what we thought we were going to see all season long, and there's a lot of reasons we could go into.
Yeah.
But that's what to me is like the eye opener.
Yeah, no doubt. And I want to say this. First of all, out of fairness, and we were down on the Buckeyes because we've watched the games, right? Closely, most of them. So shout out to the Cavs who've been awful and will continue to kick on them when it's appropriate, and it's almost always appropriate. They won 2 games. And shout out to Urban Meyer, the Buckeyes, everybody involved with that operation who said, okay, we're the underdog. You have all the reasons in the world to dismiss us. Michigan has all the reasons in the world, this revenge tour, whatever it is. This finally should be their time. And Ohio State came out really from the very first drive of the game and was in complete control of that game. It was a 3 phases, 4-quarter domination. Michigan's warts were exposed. Ohio State's. I agree with that take 100%, Dre. When you see Ohio State playing with that energy, guys flying around on both sides, and just the passion, the tempo, everything they did was too much for Michigan. And 62 points on that team. Number one defense, I don't know. I think some of that you see how Michigan plays a buttoned-up style. And, God, the Big Ten is awful.
Some of that's the Big Ten.
Yeah, the Big Ten is awful. But absolutely nothing but credit to everybody from Paris Campbell and Dwayne Haskins to Terry McLaurin, who is just a guy that jumps through the screen, loves playing football, loves doing the little things. And Urban Meyer and every coach on that staff. Urban talked last week about uncomfortable conversations. And those guys went and they finally found a way. What you're trying to say, I think, is they finally found a way to maximize their talents. They certainly knew where to attack Michigan. And all of a sudden it was this onslaught. And it's like, well, based on, going back to when was the Purdue game, mid-October, late October, you can't really trust them going forward. But you have seen the glimmer now of, oh, my goodness, this is what a team with all of these 5 stars and all these weapons is supposed to look like.
Right. That is exactly what I'm saying. It's like when I think of what I hear on signing day every February from Urban Meyer and what every publication says, you expect a couple games for them to put damn near 70 on you, and we can sit around and say, man, they could score 100 on you. But it's more than just offense. As you said, it was all 3 phases. I think I texted you at halftime, and I said the thing that jumped out to me is they dominated the line of scrimmage. Forget the score. They dominated for the first game. I mean, we thought the defensive line was going to be dominant. That's kind of the story that we were told, and that's what we were left to believe coming into the season. But you had the Bosa situation. You got young guys on the D-line. Offensive lines always take a little while to gel. But we saw Dwayne Haskins still hasn't gotten touched by a guy in a Michigan helmet, which is amazing. I mean, it was fun to watch, but it also makes me – and we can get to are they playoffs? I think they put themselves in the conversation, but I think the way we started this conversation, if they don't make it, we all should understand why. I hear the fight about Oklahoma, and Oklahoma's still got a tough task in playing Texas this weekend. But at least Oklahoma consistently has done what they've done. Like, they've consistently scored a lot of points, consistently had a bad defense. I'm not saying they're better than Ohio State. I think Ohio State could beat them, but I think Oklahoma could beat them. And really, what this really says, and I know it's not about Ohio State, Michigan, I don't care how you feel about Nick Saban. For him to keep his 5 stars motivated year in and year out to do what they've done, it's unbelievable because we've seen Urban Meyer was not able to do that for whatever reason, off-field, on-field reasons. It's really hard to run the machine that we've seen down in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, this is a good way to go to a larger college football discussion, Dre, because the magic of college football is that every Saturday matters, right? Because one loss can knock you out of the playoff, no matter who you are, right?
Right.
And
correct.
You get here, and that makes it good as a viewer. That makes it tough as a player and a coach. It makes it great as a viewer, as a consumer, as a writer, as all of those things. And now you get to the end here, and it's like, well, the Big Ten stinks, right? And it hasn't always. It's had some up years lately. This year it was god-awful, right? And then you have a Notre Dame team that navigated, that won, that plays on both coasts, that do this, but it doesn't have to go through a conference grind where teams are seeing the same tape of you and playing you every year and really getting a feel for how to beat you, right? Now, when Notre Dame goes on the road and plays a 12 o'clock game somewhere, it's a big game. It really is, but it's not the same as as conference teams having to do that. And frankly, the SEC has had some down years, and the SEC in previous years has had bad quarterback play. But the SEC has superior athletes to everyone else, and anybody who wants to argue that is an idiot. We've gone over that, right? And so now we have a situation where Georgia is a really good team and might not keep up with Alabama this weekend. They might. Hell, they might win the game. They also might get run out of the building.
Right.
Georgia's one of the best 4 teams.
For sure.
So that leads to a couple of different scenarios here. One being, if Georgia is close enough but loses the game and shows it's one of the 4 teams, you can't put them in as the 4 seed with Alabama as the 1 because that's not fair to Georgia or Alabama, right? So now the committee has to go outside its box. And then, 2, if Alabama trucks them and the Georgia gets penalized for one other loss to a really good team early in the year, then you do have a scenario where Ohio State we'll see how Ohio State looks, but they're on that fast track in Indy, and they know they need style points for the committee, right? We have an Oklahoma team that averages 50-some a game, but also just gets gashed, and if Tua plays 4 quarters, might give up 95 to them.
Right. And Clemson, I know they're not going to lose this weekend, but I watched some of that South Carolina game, and their secondary was awful. Now maybe and maybe it's just one game because I know their defensive line is good, and maybe it's just because it's South Carolina. But I got to tell you, watching South Carolina's quarterback fling it against Clemson, it was the first time this year where I was kind of like, maybe they are vulnerable against someone other than Alabama.
No doubt. And that's the thing. There is some uncertainty, right? I mean, Alabama all year long, Drew, this is a metric you won't see on some sites. Alabama covered the first half spread all the way through the third weekend of November, trucking everybody they played, just destroying them. And the only Heisman argument is that Tua doesn't have the numbers because he's only played 3 quarters in most games. Now, the last 2 weeks they haven't. One of them was against the Citadel. One of them was against Auburn, who has not had a great year, but we would all agree has really good talent, right? And so you start to see that Alabama is human. Okay, we knew that. I think Georgia and Clemson over the last couple of years have shown that to an extent. But when you look at the whole body of work, I mean, Alabama's is just way better than everybody else's. It just is. The eye test, the talent, the numbers. I mean, it looks to be the best quarterback they've had, and it's a typical Alabama defense that has somewhere between 4 and 7 first-round picks and one of the greatest defensive coaches of all time, right? So, so they're completely dominant. And Clemson's resume, I mean, Pitt might get a few first downs on Saturday. They might not. I mean, those two are in. But Georgia's good enough to play with Alabama, and the line isn't quite 2 touchdowns for a reason. Last year's national championship was an all-timer. Georgia has the guys. The teams obviously know each other because of the Kirby Smart factor, because of the SEC factor. I'm going to say that I'm not taking a side. I want to let this play out. It's just really interesting. And as I was driving to Cincinnati the other morning, I heard someone on ESPN radio propose this, that in the best interest of the SEC, they wouldn't play the conference championship game at all because the conference in Georgia can only lose from this.
Right.
And then that really makes you think, like, man, this whole system. I love the college football playoff. And guys that are screaming for 8, I've been telling you for years, it's not going to happen because they would have to ditch the conference championship games, and they're worth too much money. So until the whole system changes, that's not going to change. I love the system. I really do. I think it's the best one we've had by far. But when you have some teams play in conference championship games and Notre Dame doesn't, when you have teams go through completely different paths to get here, and Oklahoma, for example, has to play a rematch, doesn't even play in divisions, has to play a rematch here in their championship game. It's totally different and totally unfair ways to evaluate in getting to this 4.
You've mentioned Notre Dame twice already, and I haven't watched a ton of their games. I'll be the first to admit it. But the one thing, and listening to what you said, look, we all know teams differently because we all watch what we watch differently. We all have our own eyes. It's the beauty of sports. And I know it was Notre Dame had to travel across the country, and it's USC. But I've seen enough of USC's young quarterback. Just because they're on late, you just catch late set. Pac-12's got the best thing ever going on the East Coast, right? No matter if you've been drinking all day or whether you are a dad, you've been with your kids all day. I see more. On an average when I'm home on Saturdays, on the average Saturday, I see more Pac-12 football than I see anything else, just because of my day, my Saturday consists of, because they start so late in the day and the night, and I don't sleep much anyway, so I watch a ton of them. I got to tell you, man, USC has not impressed me all year long. I mean, they got a couple guys because it's USC, but they're down. I'm not going to say dominated Notre Dame for the first quarter and a half, 2 quarters, but Notre Dame just came out so blah. And Notre Dame has a couple players. But I got to tell you, Notre Dame's in the same park for me, as Ohio State. Like, I don't see them or Oklahoma. I don't see any of these other teams really giving Alabama a game. And that's where the Michigan part of this. I don't want to walk away from Michigan. I don't have to be one of those kill them because they got killed by Ohio State. They had really one terrible game that opened some eyes. Now I have a theory, and I don't know how well my theory plays out. But they played for the most part. Look, they weren't this exciting team, but they look like a Jim Harbaugh team that we've seen win before. We've seen that type of team with Stanford where the quarterback makes 2 or 3 plays, they run the ball, they solidly suffocate you. Something just was terribly off on Saturday because you said something that shoots home to me. They lost all 3 quadrants of the game, got dominated. And if this would have happened 3 years ago, no problem. If this would have happened 2 years ago, I get it. But for that game to happen this past Saturday with that team, that opened my eyes. Michigan may not be nearly as close as we thought. And as good as a coach Jim Harbaugh is, he may want to stop being so close-minded and pay attention to what Urban Meyer and Nick Saban have done offensively. I think that they're a little prehistoric offensively. I like it. It's what I grew up on. But when you see what's successful right now in big-time college football, they look like they're in the prehistoric dark ages compared to what the other teams are doing. And I don't like 5 receivers. I don't like every snap out of the shotgun. I feel like you called me a kid to start this, but I feel like your grandfather when I say this. I can't stand it inside the 3-yard line. They got to be in the shotgun. I don't like it, but I think you better get hip to a little bit more of it, Jim Harbaugh, unless you want to keep losing games like you did on Saturday.
Well, Andre, I'm glad you transitioned to Michigan in the way that you did, because really in most ways you just beat me to it. And I would say this. There is one positive that came out for Michigan football. And I try to say it's always in the middle, right? It's never as good, never as bad.
Yeah.
Right?
For sure.
But there's one positive from Michigan football that came out, and that's that you saved yourself from getting ravaged by Alabama. Because other than that is a damn near a decade worth of loss. And I'm not talking about losing to Ohio State every year since 2012. I'm talking about recovering from that. Because even when you are good, that hangs over you, right? Even if you come back next year and you're phenomenal, that game, that loss, the fact that you had this year and you gave up a 62 burger in a game you were favored, hangs over you. And one of my favorite college game day signs of all time, it said Harbaugh's taking Michigan to Rome, check. To France, check. To Indy, the X. Because that's right. The kids that are going there are playing for an absolute great institution. They're playing for an absolute great football coach, a historical program. They play in front of 106,000 people. Every Saturday they have the greatest Nike everything, and they get a chance to be legends. And they are absolutely the little brother to the one team that matters the most, and you can't shake that. I said Harbaugh will win at Michigan when he gets his quarterback. He got his quarterback. They gave up 62. They got their ass kicked. It is. You are just not, as a program, you are just not going to recover from that, and I really think that he should look into going back to the NFL. I really do.
Wow.
I don't think that's hyperbole, Dre. I'm watching Ohio State's guys just run into the end zone.
I know. Untouched.
I'm watching Michigan's guys struggle to get 6 yards even when it looks like there's a hole there. You know, a team that a team that had this great defense and has these guys that are going to get drafted and has a couple 5-stars on the perimeter like Ohio State does, and they can't get anything going. And I'm just, you look they played 2 games all year. The first game and the last game, they lost them both.
And that's lost both. Yes. And I said this to you guys during the game, and you can tell me I might be off base. I felt like this played in why Ohio State played so well too, because of I think that was an easier game for the players that the Ohio State Buckeyes have a linebacker, easier game for them to play. I thought 32 and the other line, but they played their best games of the year, coming downhill, just stopping the run. It was amazing that Michigan kept lining up like that, handing it off. I'm going, look, Ohio State's linebacker actually looks like an Ohio State linebacker now.
Right.
Like from the beginning of the game, I'm going, whoa, that's not how that guy's played all year long. And like I said, you said he should go to the NFL. I think he's a good enough coach, but he is hard-headed. So maybe he does need to go to the NFL.
Well, look,
something's not there, man. And like you said, Notre Dame is going to go get power drive by Alabama because they're a lot like what we see with Michigan, but they play a more open style. But they got a lot of the same type players on defense that make them good on defense against the Northwestern teams like USC. But somebody that can put some athletes on all 4 receiver positions and a quarterback and put it on a dime, trouble.
Yeah, so, as we've said, right, the last five-ish years, don't hold me to that 5 number, 3 programs have emerged as title or bust, right? Alabama, Clemson, Ohio State, right? In that time, now Notre Dame has its second good team in that time.
Yeah.
When Texas is up, they're in that program. It's been a while since they've been up. We're now in 13 years since they won that national championship. When USC is up, they're in that realm. Michigan is in that second tier, and it's earned. It goes back decades. It's the big stadium, the big swoosh contract, the ability to recruit the best players from all over the country, and they do. They don't just battle Ohio State in Toledo, Ohio, and in Chicago, in Detroit. They are able to go down to Florida and go down to Texas and go out east and get players. They have proven that. They are supposed to be in a top 10 program with every now and again the window opening for them to crash the playoff party, win the Big Ten title, all of this. And not only has that not happened, but they've had so many thuds, and that emphatically dry. It's just, you're not going to recover from that from a perception standpoint. And you're clearly, when you take a look at yourself and say, how can we really be that far away? That's not the standard at Michigan. It really isn't. And I don't think we're over-exaggerating by one bit in saying that Urban Meyer, whether it was his curtain call in the stadium or not, and he's saying it's not, and we'll see how that goes. Of the wins he's had, that one really, really was a Mike Tyson to the Michigan program.
That's one of the sweetest ones he's ever had. I never thought of that. That's a whole other conversation, which I like. That may be, at the end of the day, and nobody would say this today, but when you write the story and we write up, who Urban Meyer was, and there'll be plenty of people that won't like most of it or half of it. But how does Mike Freeman tweet what he tweets? Even if it may be true, but I feel like, man.
Well, I said it here last week. I said the same thing verbatim on this podcast. He's a great coach. He's not a good human.
It comes off that way, but at least you've covered him. At least you've been around him. I don't think Mike Freeman. I almost went through the archives. And be
no, I think you're wrong about that. I think Mike Freeman has covered him. I don't know Mike Freeman.
Maybe
I don't know Mike Freeman, so I don't know that.
You don't, but you stand up for all writers quickly, and that's fine. You can do that. I would be careful on how I would go about that. That's all I mean, he is what he is. But I would say this: at the end of the day, when it's written, what happened on Saturday will be a part of the legend. It's right up there with national championship.
No doubt.
Nobody expected it.
No doubt it will. And look, and that's the thing. When I was covering Ohio State all the time, 2012-ish to 15-ish. Right, and they were emerging. That was when Urban took over, and they went 12-0 the first year, despite being bowl banned and all of that stuff. My whole thing was, I really can't believe the emphasis he puts on the Michigan game when they've done this nationally. When they have arrived at this title or bust program. But I mean, that's what matters to Ohio State fans, and that's what is the biggest part of Ohio State's tradition, right? Whether Woody Hayes really said the go for free thing or not, and there's no evidence that he actually did, that's what plays on the screen during the segues, right? That's when any former Ohio State or Michigan player is interviewed 30, 40, 50 years down the road. That's the game that's brought up, regardless of how long they played in the NFL or what other huge college games they would have played in. So yeah, I mean, when you look at that undefeated record in that game, especially given the circumstances, that absolutely goes on Urban Meyer's mantle as one of the top ones. And I just think you can't overstate it. So we will see. I will be glued to a stool somewhere Saturday night because I don't know how the Buckeyes are going to respond, and I'm interested to see.
But isn't that the funniest thing? We for as great as they played, not one of us is going to sit out Saturday night with our White Claw, whatever we do, or Jack Daniels, or whatever makes or bourbon, whatever you're going at. Cleveland bourbon, that's some fine whiskey itself, bourbon itself. Whatever you're sitting down with, not one of us knows what to expect when they guys go on the field on Saturday.
Right.
Against the Northwestern team. Seriously, that is the most unbelievable thing about it. They should score 60 again. They really should. Defensively is what I finally cared about. And the secondary is still not very good. Great win. One that a lot of us will never, ever forget. How was your turkey day?
It was good. Listen, man, I had a great weekend. I wore sweatpants and watched football, and we do want to play a little bit of American Fireworks Glory Days. I got to say, on Saturday morning, in the text thread with some of my lifelong buddies, we were sharing some stories about things that went on at Ohio State Michigan parties or after in our 20s. So I really need to go to church for a few weeks. If you don't see a new podcast for the few weeks, I'm in church.
I remember. We had that conversation last year or 2 years ago. We went on a ride, and we had those conversations. Like 3 years ago, we made Rusty drive us all over the place.
Yes.
If you people ever saw when Zach and I decided to do something together and go far away, if you saw the people that we employ to drive us around, oh my God, we are as smart as we claim to be. Trust me.
Yeah, but it was great. My brother was able to come home for a day or so, coming off a big win for the Pitt Greensburg Bobcats. They got a big game this week as conference play starts. Had some other friends from out of town who were able to make it home. So, listen, I'm going to be 40 years old. I still have all four of my grandparents, and I saw them all on Thanksgiving morning. Pretty awesome. So
you're winning. You're winning.
You're winning. It was good. And then,
you're winning.
I don't think we want to spend. Well, let's see. What else did we want to cover before we got back into the Browns? Here, we talked about it.
Here, do me a favor, because I need you to we had a guy a couple weeks ago ask us to discuss Fields, and I thought about this as you were driving, and I was driving back from Chicago. You didn't ask, but my Thanksgiving was great. It was fun to be out of town. I was in Chicago, and actually I did the most hellish thing. I did something that I knew I wouldn't love doing, and it ended up turning out pretty all right. I had the gall to actually we went and saw my brother-in-laws. They were great. They were fun to be around. But we actually got the balls to actually try to go to the parade in Chicago on Thanksgiving Day. And you know me, I'm a pampered little, you can use whatever word you want. I know some of you got meaner ones than others, but I'm a pampered little boy. And I'm not used to having to, when I go to stadiums, I complain about security and stupid stuff like that. But going to this, I knew I was not going to be a winner. I knew that we were going to be overloaded with people, and traveling was going to be hard. But shout out to my brother-in-laws. They did a great job of getting me to the right places in the right time. And I actually got my kids to the parade. They saw as much of the parade as they wanted to do. And it was kind of cool as a parent to do something. When I watch it on TV, I always say to their mom, don't ever say to me or come up with the idea to do this. And then she came to me with the idea to do it. And lo and behold, it worked out. It was just cool. And we're talking about our age, and we talk about things we've done and the turkey ball football games we've gone to. Maybe one day you'll notice, maybe one day you won't. It don't matter. But I got to say, it was pretty cool to see the looks on my kids' faces. For them to see the parade, none of it meant very much to me. But as a dad, I was proud that we made a moment that they'll never forget. And when you become a father, and it was cool. Now, hopefully they don't ask me to do that shit next year. But for doing it for 1 year, and doing it the way we did it, it was really cool. And I'm glad that we had the opportunity to do that as a family. And if you ever get a chance, go ahead.
That is very cool. And you're not going to believe when I tell you who I hung out with on Thursday, but I'm going to save that one for off the air. And when we save a story for off the air on A to Z podcast, it is pretty fucking outrageous. So, but I do want to say this. I'm in the same way, Dre, blessed with my job and get to do those things. And I talked last week about how I'll never forget covering Ohio State, Michigan, right? And even when the Browns have been bad, I had never taken for granted the fact that I get paid to go to NFL. I've been to every NFL football stadium. I've been to every NFL city. I've done all this. And sometimes I don't really want to work on the weekends. Sometimes I don't want to work at all. But you never work a day when you get to do this. And I've always said when I don't feel at least a little bit of a tingle on Sunday morning, sometimes it's a goddamn hangover. You're right. But when I don't feel the actual tingle of seeing the stadium lights and seeing the players talk shit and all of that, then I will go do something else. But that being said, I really, as we've gotten older, have treasured watching Ohio State, Michigan, and or Ohio State's other big games, because sometimes circumstances don't prevent it, with a lot of my lifelong friends, some of whom live here and some of whom don't. Right. And especially as you get older on holidays, some that are out of town can't get in, some that are in town have to get out. People have to do things. So to get the opportunity.
You enjoy it a lot more.
What's that?
You enjoy it a lot more. You appreciate it a lot more.
And then I'm a fan. I'm a fan.
Right,
so,
Right, and you're around people that don't ask you $15 million. The best is being around family and watching big games like that. And no offense to anybody else, and I get it, is that you're watching it with the same people you've always watched it with, and they don't give a shit about your job. You're still Zach fucking Jackson.
Well,
I'm still Andre Knott.
That's good and bad. Both of those things. Both of those things.
That's why they're the people that are watching with us, because they got their problems too.
So, the caveat to that, and I want to transition into what I think about the Browns. And I think I'm going to write this week, although I think it might translate as a better podcast story than a written story. So we'll see. So just let me spit this out, because I thought about it, but I didn't think about how I'm going to structure it. So a lot of my friends are the same as me, obviously around the same age, grew up the same way, worshiping football, and we're old enough to remember the golden age of the Browns, not Jim Brown, but the golden age of the modern day Browns, where they came close and they were good more years than they weren't. And then we were all old enough to start finding our own way when the Browns came back. Now, my way was to be as a team employee for 10 years, as most of you know. Theirs was, going in different directions and maybe having season tickets or, maybe just following the team as people moved around. But certainly one thing that my friends have long established, Trey, is going to at least a game a year, right? And in recent years, the thing has become $5 December football, because the Browns have been so bad, and because no one goes, especially when it gets cold and the games don't mean anything, and you get maybe to that weekend before Christmas or something like that, and those who live out of town are able to get in town. Those who maybe all year long have had their kids have soccer or football on the weekends and can't get to the Browns game. It's something we've done. And the first time I was able to do it, the first year that I was not working for the Browns, I wasn't covering them that week. Long story short, a bunch of us went up in a limo, pulled right next to the stadium about an hour before the game, got out to get our cold weather gear on, bought 2 tickets for $10 off the first guy that walked by, and Jerome Harrison was on the ticket. The Browns had traded him 4 weeks earlier. So that being said, each year when it starts to go bad, each Sunday, my phone blows up from this group of guys who are diehard Browns fans. And whether they're watching from work or listening while they're at their kid's soccer game or watching in the bar or together, they're bitching about the Browns, right? 4-12 or 12-4. Right. Well, we know that answer. Meaningful game or not, they're into it. And as they started to slide this October, and maybe, just maybe, this year's December in Berea was in October instead of December, we'll see.
Yeah.
They started referencing, at least we get our $5 football. At least we still get our $5 football.
Right.
And I'll say what's both interesting and fun, whether you give a shit about my friends or my stories or not, is that the Browns, for the first time in a long time, are in a position where $5 December football is at risk. And we'll see where this goes. Oh. And I'm going to say one more thing that's just the truth. You guys can call me a hater if you're not. You're not in the hunt for anything when you're in 4th place in your own division. Okay? We'll see how that goes. A lot can change in a couple weeks. But when you have the quarterback and when you have guys that look like real NFL players, and it's clearly that this team is better both talent and execution-wise and just energy and being excited-wise right now than it was 3-4 weeks ago, then hell yeah, these last 5 games are exciting. And considering where the Browns have been, as a fan, you should be absolutely excited about what you see. Yes.
Just chill out with the in the hunt stuff. Let's get through midway through December, and that's when it matters about being in the hunt. In any sport. I said this earlier, and I mean this, because to me, it plays into your story. It was cool for me to wake up on Sunday after all my traveling, being back and forth for Thanksgiving in Chicago, watching Ohio State. Look, I'll be honest with you guys, and as you said, there are some Sundays where I wake up and the headache is all my fault, and the lack of sleep is all my fault, and the pity that I have upon myself driving to wherever I have to drive to do pregame for a Browns pregame. And trust me, I've done a lot of, even despite my job change, I still continue doing Browns pregame shows and sometimes post. And I'm not bitching about it. I'm blessed to be able to do them. I got to admit, when I woke up this past Sunday, where after traveling, Thanksgiving, watching football all night, and that LSU game kept me up and everything else, I actually got in the car and without coffee and without having to pray 18 times on 77, I actually kind of look forward to going to do the pregame and talking football. And that was one of the first things that we said when I joined. Everybody said, "How cool is this? We're just talking football and the chances of winning a game." Now, stories make themselves for whatever they are. To see a game plan where a team comes out and can thoroughly dominate the opponent, I don't care whether it's the Pony League team down in Cincinnati, whether it's the Cincinnati Reds or if it's the Bengals, that is something to applaud. To see a team that comes out prepared and ready is something that we haven't seen a lot. I know it's exciting as all get out to be able to talk about number 6 and what number 6 has been able to bring. I'll raise my hand high, and I'll tell you the one thing that I adore. Adore. It's a big word for me to use because I'm not a big fan yet. I adore his footwork and how he keeps plays alive but keeps his head downfield. I think for anyone, me included, let's be honest. Let's cut the shit. We're all friends here, or we're all enemies. Either way, we're going to walk away feeling the same way about each other. Let's be honest. When we first saw Baker Mayfield, the obvious it's just like we make fun of when there's a European basketball player and we compare him to a European basketball player because it's just too hard to compare a player to a player. Like we make fun of when a white guy is one way, we can compare him to another white guy. It was inevitable that Baker Mayfield was going to be compared to Johnny Manziel because of size, because of division, because of arrogance, because of Texas, being from the state of like a lot of that plays into it. Wrong or right? It's just that's realistically how we look at things. Not everyone did it, but a lot of people did, and it was a lazy comparison. I'll admit, but most comparisons I hate to tell you are lazy. But the one comparison and the reason why you can't compare them at all, and there's many, but I don't care about all the others. This is the one that matters to me that I adore about him. His footwork in the pocket. The way he extends plays but is not looking to take off and run, that's why I believe the general manager fell in love with him. And I think that's why if you're a coach, you can fall in love with him. It's why, and I'm not saying he's this guy. It's why Ben Roethlisberger has been successful for so much of his career because we always say it's not about X's and O's. It's about who and what, Zach Jackson.
Jimmy's and Joe's.
Thank you. Every coach does X's and O's. It's the coaches that win that the Jimmy and Joes can expound upon what they put up there. Baker Mayfield, and everything I'm going to say about him is not always going to be positive. But I would tell, most of the touchdowns yesterday, Zach, they didn't come from the initial read. It didn't come from the initial 5-step, 7-step. It came from him dropping, seeing that there was coverage, and his guys being with him, and him moving his feet in the pocket and getting the ball downfield with his head up. That is a great trait to have, especially with his size. But there, I said it. I think that is – I'm not about all this other nonsense. There's some nonsense that needs to be cleaned up, in my opinion. But the part that I just said can make him a successful quarterback for a long time because it's hard to cover. The way the NFL is set up today with where you can and cannot touch receivers and how you can and cannot hit quarterbacks, he can be pretty successful with that trait that I just brought up, in my opinion.
The Browns and Bengals – no. The Browns and Hugh Jackson are like a couple that just got divorced, and it was mostly Hugh Jackson's fault, but they just had to see each other at their kid's grad party, and of course the Browns were going to clown him a little bit. It's good for both parties that they're out of each other's lives now, right? Yeah. And I know they play again in 5 weeks, but they had to do that. Demarius Randall had to do that. I'm glad he did. I laughed. The Baker shit.
Hey, good for him.
Same way. I think we're wasting our breath.
Yeah.
But good for Baker if it feels that way. He wanted to make his point. And Hugh is a clown, always has been a clown. We begged the Haslams last December not to bring him back. We told you in July and August our expectations were tempered because he came back. Here we are and move on. But I listened to you talk about Baker, and I almost totally agree. And I just want to add one thing here. That regardless of whether you think that Tom Brady and Aaron Rodgers are still on top of their games and will be for multiple weeks, let alone years, regardless of what you think about Drew Brees and playing in the Dome and playing in that system and all of that, regardless of whether you think Baker and Deshaun Watson and other guys can last playing the way they play, he is extremely accurate. That is extremely important.
Yes.
That is part A, and part B is this. If you wanted to deem the Browns season a success, getting rid of Hugh Jackson, and Baker showing that he can play a little bit, it's already a success. It already is. So you take that and you move on. I don't want to hear a deeper discussion about culture until I see a team out of fourth place, until I see the new coaching hire, until I see Antonio Callaway stay away from trouble all offseason, all that stuff that's down the road. The kid is good enough that you can think about having a winning record next year, and you can start to envision how this team adds pieces and grows and has something. I mean, the Browns, they've never had a quarterback in this new incarnation. We all know that. They've also never had a situation where you can say their best three players are Baker Mayfield, Myles Garrett, and Denzel Ward in some sort of order, and they're all under contract, and they're all going to be here a while. Right?
Yes. The window's getting ready to open. The window's getting ready
to open. We spent 40 minutes looking for the right phrase, and God damn it, you beat me to it.
Yes! The turkey did me good. The only thing I'll say about it, and I 100% agree with you about the Hughes situation, it was too soon. You had the perfect analogy. I think in 5 weeks from now, no one reacts the way they do. No matter who was at fault, no matter who was wrong, you're not together anymore. And it just happened. And it's a clean, like, there's still, like, it's like when you rip the Band-Aid off too soon, the scab is still there. And I don't care whose side you're on. I don't know why the Bengals, in their right mind, this tells you all you need, and this is my only opinion, I'll move on about it. Why the Bengals will put him on the sideline a month after he was on the sideline for the other team, knowing that team was coming to play. Like, that just tells you the lack of depth of the Cincinnati Bengals organization. Like, don't get me wrong, Bill Belichick would have did the same shit. You just wouldn't have seen Hugh Jackson on the – like, he would have brought him in, and he would have stayed in the locker room yesterday, right? Mm-hmm. He would have gleaned all the information he could from Hugh, just like he would do with Mike Lombardi, and then you wouldn't be allowed to see him. Like, you'd be out of sight, out of mind, so you can't let what happened happen. Of course players are motivated to shove it up Hughes' ass, whether they liked him or not. You want to show out in front of your old team, in front of your old coaches. That's an age-old thing. You always want to play well against your brother, against somebody you got some kind of relationship with. If you don't believe me, go to your local park when they're playing basketball and watch a bunch of high school kids and watch when a couple girls show up, how they play compared to when they play when it's just them out there. And Brody Jackson, I hope you got time to listen, because I'm telling you, you want that team to win more than 4 games, you better tell them to get some girlfriends or tell them to show up. You play different when the women come. You just do. And in that reference, I just called you a woman. You take that from where you want to take it.
I got one more thought on this, and I know you do too. Hey, Bengals. If you don't want Jabril Peppers running around your stadium, beat them. This is the National Football League. And, of course, he did. I mean, look, you're right. There's going to come a time, Dre, when the Browns are going to have to learn to handle success, and that time is coming. Finally, now that you've won 2 games, now I'll finally entertain discussion of what might have happened earlier in the year if you'd been a little better coached or a ball would have bounced a different way. Until you won 2 games in a row, I'm not having that discussion because grow up, it's a tough league, right? But, yes, that's how I feel about that. And just as far as the Bengals in general, I mean, 3%, and that might be a big number, of NFL games are over on the second drive. That game yesterday was over on the second drive.
It was done. Done. Like, it wasn't even a game. Demarius Randall, God bless you, man. Because he said on Friday he ain't telling nothing but the truth. Yes. He said, if AJ Green out there, we're going to kick their ass. And I was like, not smart.
Well, he didn't realize that AJ couldn't play safety and corner, too, because that defense was so banged up, so embarrassingly bad. Oh, my goodness.
Yeah. And I'm not making excuses. It's just real. They got like 12 guys on the IR, right?
Yeah.
They were out.
No doubt.
Left tackle. Yeah. Like I'm just being realistic. They didn't have their guys. So be it. That happens to every team in the NFL. They didn't show up either. Can I bring up something else that I know is not sexy and I know nobody will write about because Baker gives you plenty to write about and everybody writes about the sexy stuff? 2 things. I think the Browns finally are realizing how to get the most out of their receiver that's paid like the number 1, but really he's a real good gadget to have, and there's nothing wrong with that. The way the league is set up now, it's good to have gadgets. He had 3 catches, 30 yards, and they whooped a team. Number 2, and Jarvis is going to have his days, but it's nice to see that this offense is building without Baker having to force feed him. Does that mean you know what I'm saying? Like, a lot of times we go, oh, this quarterback's got it. Like, I feel bad for Deshaun Watson because with their injuries at receiver and not really having a tight end, he has to force feed. Now, he's got to force feed to one of the best that we got right now, and Hopkins. But it would be nice to see him having an open offense where he don't got to just stare one guy down and wait till he gets open. Baker, I think something great in Baker's success going forward will be it hasn't been just force feed Jarvis Landry. That's a good thing, and it may not show up for another 60 months or 8 months. We'll see. Part two that I got to get out, the third best revelation of the season. Fourth, it's not the top, but it's going to be very important. And we still got – and look, this time next week you guys might be killing me. They may have quietly found a left tackle. Let's see how he plays against the toughest two dudes you're going to see, some real dudes next Sunday, and Watt and Clowney. But if Greg Robinson – Zach, and I know this hasn't been talked about, but I think this is huge. If Greg Robinson can literally be their left tackle for the next 2 years, 3 years, and hold his end up, he's 26 years old, and he can just do his part. He doesn't have to be Joe Thomas. As long as you don't have to chip and help him every freaking down, and so far they haven't had to, and you don't have to go out and draft one of those in this year's draft, and you can develop one, or you can do it organically, the word that I love hearing nowadays, that would be huge in the development of this Cleveland Browns offense, because you can truly look for some offensive weapons to go with Baker. You can truly look for some more secondary guys. And I'm going to whisper this last part to you.
You ain't whispered since 1981.
And I got in trouble the day I did that. If Greg Williams can make them compete like this the rest of the way out, how much do you think of? And I ain't crazy like those other places talk about head coach. But how crazy would it be to try to keep him around as a defensive coordinator? And how much does that make the politics get weird?
This is a discussion for later in December. That's all I can say. I'm not. Greg has done a great job. I think Greg has presented himself well. And even before this change, I thought Greg coached his ass off this year, and I thought he made a lot of excuses last year. So full credit to Greg. But I just don't believe John Dorsey came this far to hire Greg Williams, and for that to change, we're going to have to see we're going to have to see more than a few games. Fair?
I know, no doubt. Fair, that's fair. But I'm saying, when you see how they played the last 2 weeks,
no doubt.
And you know I'm not. You know where I stand on Greg Williams.
Yeah,
but I'm a man enough to give men credit.
The larger point is that this defense is made for guys like Randall and Joe Schobert, right? And if you change, then you have to work. Yes.
That's my point.
That's the larger
you're
point.
going to, like, they finally have something kind of built that I'm not saying you got to do exactly it, but I'm finally getting to a point where I understand what they're doing defensively, and I like what they do defensively, especially when they got the right guys on the island. Like when they get the other kid back on the other, like they're like I like and you got a one generational guy at defensive end, and Garrett, if he can stay healthy the rest. Like there's some things. The window is finally opening. What else in the NFL jumped out to you this week? I got to say the Carolina Seattle game was a fun game, but very eye-opening for me. I thought Philadelphia was done the way they let the Giants come out on them early, but they still got a little life because they didn't roll over. But I think the Seattle team, I don't. You know what? For as high as we're all, and we should be, for as high as we are on New Orleans, Kansas City. Who's the other team that's right there with New Orleans on the NFC?
The Rams.
San Diego deserves the Rams. The Rams.
San Diego doesn't have a team anymore, you old man.
Yeah, the Chargers. They're going to be San Diego. As long as they wear those uniforms, they're San Diego to me. Sorry.
Well,
now, the Rams have been back and forth 15 billion times, so I can figure out where they're at.
The truth
Chargers
of the matter,
legit, and I think Seattle's going to make a run.
The truth of the matter is, you're going to have to hold those NFL thoughts because we're on 3% battery. but
now you guys know what it's like to date Zach Jackson.
I hate to cut it off for several reasons. One being with your Greg Robinson take, you were like, it was maybe the greatest unintentional segue for how I wanted to close it, and I wanted to close it by saying this. First of all, thank you guys for listening. Thanks as always to Scene, to the Honeymoon Grill, and to American Fireworks. And on The Athletic, sometime in the next 48 hours, I had a conversation with Greg Robinson about where he's been and where he's going. And he hasn't really talked to the media. And I was one of the first people to say I don't think the Browns want to play Greg Robinson. Well, a lot's changed for the offense, but Greg Robinson is one of them. And so today at facebook.com/A to Z podcast, I posted a link to an athletic discount where you can get gift subscriptions for the holidays and get a free T-shirt. But rather than me endorse it, You are a gifted endorser, as we know. So I want you, a non-employee of The Athletic, to tell everybody that hasn't subscribed yet why they should subscribe as we get out of here.
It's the greatest companion you can have if you love sports, you love great writing, you love being able to find stories that you just can't find. I know it's something new and different that you actually have to pay for it, but it's the wave of the future. I said originally when they first started a couple of years ago, it was like having a Sports Illustrated delivered to my phone every day, and I stick by that. It's cool that you can set it up the way you want. They've expanded faster than I ever thought it would, but I feel like I can open up the best USA Today newspaper that I ever could. And if you know me, when I got a USA Today 20 years ago, it was one of my favorite moments of the day. Whether you're an Atlanta fan, whether you're an Oakland fan, whether you're a Cleveland fan, whether you want to know the latest of what's going on in Milwaukee, you can set your page up. They've got great national writing. The college football writing, college basketball writing is top-notch. But you also get stories like Zach Meisel does constantly of just the personal what sports bring to families when they go through tragedies, when they go through anything. I'm one of the biggest fans, one of the biggest supporters. I got my Athletic hat on as we speak. I wore it now. Here's another quick story before we die. In Chicago, I'm pushing my kids Friday, day after Thanksgiving, pushing them through Michigan Ave. People all over the place. I got them in strollers, and my kids hate me in the strollers, but there's a million people everywhere. And a guy had a Cleveland hat on, and he was strolling his kids by too. And I heard him say to his father-in-law, I think that's Andre Knott that just passed us. He goes, I noticed him, and he goes, and I saw that Athletic hat, and I know it's him because I heard him cry about it. I turned as I was at the straight intersection, and I turned, and I said, yes, it's me. Thank you for recognizing me. Go get a subscription to The Athletic. Dude in Chicago recognized me because I had the Athletic hat on because he hears me talk about it. So it's legit, and I look forward to the Greg Robinson story because there's got to be something to a guy that was drafted number 2 overall and at 26 years old still kind of searching for his way in the league.
I was born to write about average-ish football teams. Andre Knott was born to endorse. We do the A to Z podcast every week. We hope you come back and see us at A2Zpodcast.com. Dre? Konnichiwa.
Konnichiwa, the Atlantic.
Talk to you later this week.